Thank you, and morning everybody. Hasn't it been great to worship God together this morning? So appreciated what the team have done there, and it's bang on in terms of where we're going with the message this morning, where we're really going to be focusing on the reign of God, the kingdom of God, through looking this week at 1 Kings and next week at 2 Kings, although actually in the original Hebrew Bible, both were kind of one book together, so there are lots of themes weaving them together. I want to begin though by telling you about a couple of summers ago, and it was middle of August, and Alison and myself, Alison's my wife, by the way, I'm John, I should have said, hi everybody, I'm John. Alison and me were at a big change in our lives. Lots of things were changing, and we'd been away for 14 days. I've been conference preaching every day non-stop for 14 days, alongside all this change going on in our lives. And to be honest, we were totally wiped out. But the good news was, we were on our way to France for a week by ourselves in a friend's wonderful house down near the south coast of France. A big pool in the garden. There's going to be a picture of it up on the screen there. Wonderful, wonderful setting for us. And just in the hill overlooking where we were, there was one of those gorgeous French medieval villages that seems like it's kind of tumbling off the hill towards you. Just idyllic setting. So we arrived and we dropped into the pool and we were ready for the perfect holiday. The sense of relief was palpable. The next morning we woke up and we were both ill. And we were ill for pretty much the rest of the week. Like overnight, the glory of our perfect holiday had just kind of faded away to almost nothing. You're meant to feel very sorry for us at this point, but I'm not hearing much sympathy out there. But you know, reading through the books of 1 and 2 Kings can feel a little bit like that. Glory that then fades. You see, you could say that the whole of the Bible really is the story of the kingdom of God, the story of God's reign in creation. The story of how human beings thrive under that reign and how life unravels when that reign isn't acknowledged. And as King David comes to the throne, we had that back in 1 Samuel, it's like Israel is beginning to experience something of that kingdom reign of God in their national life. Because remember what we saw about King David? He was the king after God's own heart. In other words, he wasn't just some kind of power broker doing his own thing and strutting around. He understood that his reign was an expression of the reign of God. The kingdom was coming because God's king was on the throne. Great news. And more than that, 2 Samuel last week, which Chris opened to us, God had promised King David that he would have a son who would rule over an everlasting kingdom and would establish the temple, the meeting place between heaven and earth, so that the king, the real king, God, was living among his people. The kingdom was coming. So as we get to the beginning of 1 Kings, we're thinking there's all these promises and they're just about to be fulfilled. It's going to be amazing. The kingdom's coming. It's like an idyllic holiday down on the south coast of France. It's going to be perfect. And in the early chapters of 1 Kings, it really looks like the good times have arrived as Solomon the Wise establishes his reign. And under his wisdom, the kingdom does flourish. There's good organization. There's abundant supplies for the king. There's peace and prosperity for the people. And as promised, Solomon does build the temple. And when he builds it, and Solomon dedicates it with an amazing prayer of dedication, and then the Lord comes in all his glory and fills the temple, as if he's saying, look, I'm moving in. I'm coming to settle among my people. The true king is here. It's amazing. In fact, it's so good that people from all the surrounding nations begin to hear about it. In chapter 10 of 1 Kings, a famous queen, the Queen of Sheba, from what we would now call Yemen, comes to Jerusalem to sit at Solomon's feet and learn from his wisdom and see his kingdom because it's so good. See, God's reign blesses people. Isn't that good news? We've been celebrating God's reign this morning in our worship. But it's not just a kind of abstract thing out there. No, God's reign blesses people. It's what we were made for. We flourish as human beings when we live under the reign of the God who made us for himself and loves us so much. And it isn't just a religious thing. No, everything comes to life in Israel as God reigns. Society comes together and flourishes. That's, of course, why in our mission as a church, we care about people's spiritual needs, but also about their emotional and physical and social needs, because God's reign blesses us as whole people. It's about the whole of life, and it's good news for the whole of life. The glory of the kingdom. But just as the glory quickly faded on what we thought was going to be our perfect holiday in France, so the glory of Solomon's kingdom quickly fades as well. In fact, even if you look a bit more closely at the glory days, there are a few things that make you begin to worry. For example, Solomon is accumulating huge amounts of personal wealth, which Deuteronomy 17 told us kings shouldn't do among God's people. And then he's using slave labor for construction projects. It's all deeply troubling, not really what we want to see. And then later in his reign, it kind of gets worse as he marries the daughters of lots of foreign kings, basically for political purposes. And by the way, just because it's in the Bible at that point doesn't make it okay. It's not okay for powerful people to marry lots of women. It's not okay. And it wasn't okay then. It's not okay now. And with Solomon's wives, his many wives, come many gods. And slowly, Solomon's heart is turned towards those gods and away from the God of Israel. The glory of the kingdom, with God at its heart, is fading. In fact, by the time we get to the end of 2 Kings, the glory has departed altogether as Jerusalem falls and its temple is burned to the ground. And in one sense, what 1 and 2 Kings do as a whole book is to tell the story of that unfolding disaster. The kingdom in all its glory fading away to exile and destruction. I've just put a rough outline of 1 and 2 Kings up on the screen. The glorious kingdom, the wounded kingdom when it divides in two between Israel in the north, Judah in the south. The confronted kingdom that we're going to focus on today with the ministry of Elijah. And then the comforted kingdom we'll look at next week with the ministry of Elisha. But despite the ministry of these great prophets, still the kingdom is on this long-term journey towards destruction because of its disobedience, ending in the exile to Assyria and to Babylon. There's the kind of overview of the book. But if you just look at that overview visually for a moment, it's quite striking that a book that we call 1 and 2 Kings has as 2 of its major characters people who aren't kings at all, Elijah and Elisha, who were prophets. Prophets are just people who speak from God to his people. And Elijah and Elisha were towering prophets in the Bible's story. And actually that's really important because it reminds us that as we go through 1 and 2 Kings, we're not just looking at a bit of kind of ancient politics or the history of a couple of ancient kingdoms. No, we're looking at the story of the kingdom of God, the true king. And the prophets were his mouthpiece, speaking his voice into the kingdoms, calling the disobedient kings and the disobedient kingdoms back to loyalty to the God of Israel, because he is the true king. So this morning we're going to focus for a few minutes on Elijah. And Elijah's name literally means Yahweh, or the Lord is God. The Lord is God. And that really is very much what Elijah's whole ministry is about. He's challenging Israel to stop worshiping the Canaanite gods and to give all of their loyalty to the God of Israel, because he, the Lord, is God. That's Elijah's ministry. And with his ministry, the kingdom is confronted. Now, the background, and you might want to have 1 Kings 18 open in front of you if you've got a device. We're going to focus there mainly. But the background is the disastrous reign of King Ahab in Israel, the northern kingdom, along with his very powerful idol-worshipping wife, Queen Jezebel from Sidon. And under the influence of Ahab and Jezebel, the worship of Canaanite gods, particularly the Baals and Asherah, the worship of these gods took hold of the heart of the nation and squeezed the life out of the people of God. And in 1 Kings 18, that conflict between the worship of the Canaanite gods and the worship of Israel's God comes to a head as King Ahab is invited by Elijah to come and meet him on Mount Carmel. Now, one thing you should know about Mount Carmel is it was known to the Assyrians as the mountain of Baal, one of the great gods of the Canaanites. In other words, it was Baal's territory where this confrontation was going to take place. Chapter 18, verse 17, let's pick up the story. When Ahab saw Elijah, he exclaimed, "So, is it really you, you troublemaker of Israel?" Because Elijah's prayers have plunged the life of Israel into 3 years of searing drought. It has brought a lot of trouble, but for Elijah, it's a bit rich for Ahab to call him the troublemaker of Israel, because the only reason that Elijah has prayed for the drought is as a judgment of God, because Ahab and Jezebel have led the people away from worship of the true God. In other words, he is the real troublemaker. So verse 18, Elijah says back, "I have made no trouble for Israel. You and your family are the troublemakers, for you have refused to obey the commands of the Lord and have worshipped images of Baal instead. Now, summon all Israel to join me at Mount Carmel, along with 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who are supported by Jezebel." There's a moment of confrontation coming. Verse 20, so Ahab summoned all the people of Israel and the prophets to Mount Carmel, and Elijah stood in front of them and said, "How much longer will you waver, hobbling between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal is God, then follow him." But the people were completely silent. Pause there for a moment. Here's the key choice. If the Lord, Yahweh, the God of Israel, if the Lord is God, Elijah says, follow him. In other words, to believe in God is not merely to give assent to. It's not just a theory. Yeah, I believe, tick the box. No, if the Lord is God, follow him. It changes your life if the Lord is God. But if Yahweh is God, if Baal is God, follow him. You have to make your choice. But how do we know who is the true God? Well, Elijah proposes this test. 2 bulls are going to be brought up onto Mount Carmel and prepared as sacrifices. One of them will be put on Baal's altar along with a bit of firewood so it can burn. And then the other will be put on the altar to the Lord, also with some firewood. But nobody's going to light the fire. Instead, the people are going to pray, and then the God who answers by fire, he's going to be the one who's acknowledged as the true God. Deal. That's the contest. So, the prophets of Baal have the first go, and they have the whole day to call on their God. By lunchtime, nothing has happened. So verse 27, Elijah starts to taunt them. About noontime, he began mocking them. "You'll have to shout louder," he scoffed, "for surely he is a god. Perhaps he's daydreaming, or perhaps he's gone to the loo, or maybe he's away on a trip, or is asleep and needs to be awakened." Well, they pray on, and their prayers reach fever pitch, and their blood flows as they cut themselves to pieces, which incidentally is what happens when idols take control of us, including the idols of our own culture. Idols promise so much, but they deliver so little. And what they end up doing is diminishing and destroying us, choice by choice as they make us their slaves. I've seen it so many times. I've wrestled it with myself. That sense of this thing in my heart where there's someone I have to impress, or there's some success that I have to achieve, or there's some possessions that I have to have as my own. And the moment we let anything become that important to us that we have to have it, it becomes our idol and it makes us its slave. Choice by choice, it destroys us. It diminishes us. It messes us up. So they prayed. They cut themselves. They longed for God, for their God to answer. But nothing happened. Verse 29. They raved all afternoon until the time of the evening sacrifice. But still, there was no sound, no reply, no response. Did you get that? No sound, no reply. No response, because Baal is dead. He's not even there. He can do nothing. And then it's Elijah's turn. And he rebuilds the Lord's neglected altar, and he digs a trench around it, and he sets the sacrifice on top, and he drenches the whole thing with buckets of water. The odds are completely stacked against Elijah. He is alone, whereas Baal and Asherah have got nearly 1,000 prophets between them. He is on Mount Carmel, which is Mount Baal. In other words, Baal has home advantage. And there's buckets of water all over the sacrifice. But then in contrast to all the noise and all the blood and all the fury of Baal's prophets, Elijah just steps forward and prays this simple prayer. Verse 36, O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, prove today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant. Prove that I have done all this at your command. Oh Lord, answer me. Answer me so that these people will know that you, O Lord, are God and that you have brought them back to yourself. Do you see his heart? He wants not just to win a battle, he wants the people back with the Lord, their God. You brought them back to yourself. Verse 38, immediately the fire of the Lord flashed down from heaven and burned up the young bull, the wood, the stones, and the dust. It even licked up all the water in the trench. It's obvious the sacrifice has been accepted. A dramatic, extraordinary moment. God, the true king of the kingdom, has stepped in. He's shown his authority. He's asserted his reign. And the people draw the only conclusion that they can. Verse 39, when the people saw it, they fell face down on the ground and cried out, the Lord, he is God. Yes, the Lord is God. And they turn against Baal and his prophets, at least for a time. Well, it's a dramatic moment, but we can get lost in the kind of firework display of this moment. I want to suggest to you something even more profound is going on that we mustn't miss. You see, in the Bible, including in 1 and 2 Kings, fire often represents the judgment of God. What do I mean by that? Well, God's judgment is his righteous anger against human sin. And sin isn't just the obvious stuff that other people do. Sin is the stuff I do that lurks in my heart. My rebellion against God, my desire to put myself rather than God at the center. It's everything that diminishes and destroys us as human beings. And God is angry about it because it's contrary to everything he made us for. His judgment is his anger against that sin. And so often, the fire of God represents that judgment. Just a few chapters on at the beginning of 2 Kings, Elijah again calls down fire from heaven, and it's clearly the fire of judgment on those who are resisting and rejecting him. Right at the end of 2 Kings, Jerusalem and its temple are burned with fire as God's judgment falls on the nation as a whole. Well, here on Mount Carmel, the fire has fallen, and it is the fire of judgment. But it's fallen not on the nation, but on the sacrifice which represents the sins of the nation. You might call it a substitute for the nation. And because the fire of judgment has fallen on the nation's substitute, the nation itself is saved. And so Elijah prays, and the drought is lifted, and Israel drinks in the rain and lives again. The moment of confrontation becomes a moment of salvation, at least for now. But follow the timeline about 9 centuries forward from this point, and you come to another mountain where another substitute is sacrificed, where Jesus hangs on a cross with the sin not just of the nation of Israel, but of the whole world on his shoulders. With my sin, with your sin, with our sin, all our rebellion, all our resistance to God and his ways rests on the shoulders of Jesus as he says, I will take it. I will take responsibility for it all. He is the perfect human being, and therefore the perfect substitute for us. And as he suffocates to death on the cross, the fire of God's judgment falls on him as he's enveloped by the darkness and dies in place of us so that we can be forgiven and walk free. You see, the God revealed in Jesus Christ is the God who answers by fire. But Jesus doesn't stay dead on the cross. On the third day, he rises from death, revealing himself to be the true king of the kingdom, the one who has smashed through injustice and evil to defeat the power of sin and death and Satan forever. And as Elijah prays for rain after the sacrifice is made, so the crucified, risen, and ascended Jesus baptizes his church in the Holy Spirit so that we can live in relationship with him now and forever, filled with his transforming and empowering and life-giving presence. And so in Jesus Christ this morning, the kingdom of God confronts us. You see, the God revealed in Jesus is the true God who answers by fire. In Jesus, the true King of the kingdom has stepped into history and shown himself in his resurrection. Elijah's challenge is therefore reframed for us this morning. The challenge in verse 21. If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him. For us, it's reframed. If Jesus is Lord, follow him. If anything else is Lord, follow them. But you have to make your choice. You have to make your choice. Did you notice Elijah's language in the rest of verse 21? How much longer will you waver, hobbling between the two opinions? The two opinions between the Lord, who was pretty useful at rescuing the people from Israel and giving them a land after all, and Baal, who specialized in things like having plenty of sex and money and children. Well, why not have them both? That would be ideal, wouldn't it? So tempting. But Elijah is saying, no, you can't have both. You can't hobble between the two opinions. There is only one God, and he must have the undivided loyalty and worship of his people. And friends, that's where the rub comes for us. It's so challenging for us in our kind of FOMO culture that's always fearful of missing out on something, which wants to leave all its options open, which runs scared of commitment. Hey, why not just trust Jesus for the spiritual side of life and then trust money, sex, and power for the real world? That makes sense, doesn't it? Surely we can have both. Jesus for Sundays and the culture for work and sexual ethics. Perfect. Elijah says no. No, we can't. You can only give supreme importance to one thing in your life. If Jesus is Lord, follow him. And don't just tick the boxes of belief. No, let him change your life. Follow him, bringing the whole of your life step by step into line with the kingdom rule of God, in which we truly flourish as human beings. If Jesus is Lord, follow him. That's the confrontation of the kingdom. And it's the challenge in front of us all here today. So I want to ask you, as the kingdom comes and the Holy Spirit is here, and the challenge to you and to me is there. If Jesus is Lord, follow him. I want to ask you, have you made your own choice? Or are you still hobbling and wavering between the two opinions? Maybe you've been around church for a while and you know you've never made the choice. Maybe it looks to the outside world like you have, but in your heart you're still wavering. And this morning the kingdom confronts and says, look, if Jesus is Lord, follow him. Are you going to make your choice and follow him today? Or maybe there's a rival for Jesus, an idol, to call it what it is, that's taken control of your heart. Might be a relationship you have to have, an image you have to project, a lifestyle you can't be without. Could be anything that's become non-negotiable and supreme in your heart that pushes Jesus to the edge so that he's no longer Lord. God is here. His Spirit is moving, confronting and inviting. If Jesus is Lord, follow him. Friend, what is your response today? Can I invite you to stand as we prepare to worship, and I'll just lead us in a prayer of response. And if you know you've been hobbling between two opinions, wavering, never really making your choice to follow Jesus as your Lord, I want to ask you just where you are to raise your hand and say, I'm making that choice today. Jesus is Lord, so I'm going to follow him. If that's where you are, please just raise your hand where you are now. And Father, for those who are hearing the confrontation and the invitation of the kingdom, I want to pray today, help them to make that choice. Come by your Spirit. Help them to leave behind a life without you and to make you Lord for all the days that are coming as they put their trust in you. Fill them with your Spirit. Touch their lives. Renew them, we pray. But maybe for some of us here who are Christians but are struggling with idols that colonize our hearts and take grip of our emotions, make us their slaves. Maybe just now in the silence, it's the moment to name those idols before God, to break their power, and to say, no, Jesus, you and you alone are Lord. And if that's a real struggle for you, I want to invite you to chat with the prayer team and pray with them. We often need support and help in breaking the power of things that have taken control in our lives. The prayer team will be at the front, happy to minister to you in that. If Jesus is Lord, follow him. Lord Jesus, you are Lord. We want to follow you. It's the greatest joy and privilege of our lives. We worship you. Amen.